government, and it was on the cover of the Washington Times. So I see only more expansion on this COG type program. I don't think it's a coincidence that this week is when we saw the 9/11 Commission release over 1,200 interviews, transcripts of interviews at the end of the Bush administration, so they couldn't be ridiculed. I'm sure that, when researchers...
You looked at that schedule, almost half of them are still withheld.
Yes.
They're releasing them, but not really releasing them.
Yeah, some of them still have clearances on them. They say, oh, well, national security clearance.
It's going to take legislation to get all of that stuff cleared, and I don't have much confidence that this Congress will do it. But I think it's, if we're revamping the whole of our constitutional arrangement in this country because of this largest murder, certainly in the history of the United States, and least investigated, and we still don't know, and we can't even see, after the Kennedy assassination, you had the Warren Commission, which essentially covered things up, but at least it had the decency to publish its evidence. And we're going to need legislation to force the evidence, whatever it was, from the 9/11 Commission release. But let me tell you the thing that worries me most about Obama. We had an election where we had a choice. The parties gave us a choice between a candidate, McCain, who wanted to fight two wars, and a candidate, Obama, who, by the way, I could say good things about Obama on this program. I'm not totally hostile to him by any means, except when it came to Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And when he was talking about Iraq, this is what he had to say. I'm quoting now from his website. The scale of our deployments in Iraq continues to set back our ability to finish the fight in Afghanistan. Well, it's very clear since then that Obama means to not just to fight in Afghanistan, but to escalate in Afghanistan. And I think you've already said that that's a war which is going nowhere, and is our presence is making things worse, not better. It's and any sane person looking at that war knows that if you're even thinking of trying to finish it, first of all, you're not going to succeed. The Russians didn't. The British didn't. Nobody has ever succeeded in doing this. But if you're going to try, you're going to have to put vastly more troops there than there are now. We are destabilizing Pakistan, which is one of the shakiest constitutional governments in the region, and is one with nuclear weapons. So what we are doing has increased the chances that Islamic fundamentalists may end up with a state of Pakistan and nuclear weapons to boot. So this is where I think Obama needs to be reined in, and I don't see that coming from Congress.
No, I don't see that either, and I see it as a redistribution of forces, getting people out of an unpopular war in Iraq only to put them into Afghanistan and create the same kind of a quagmire situation. So we still have our presence in the Middle East. I mean, to me, this is really about building a Eurasian Union. It's what the PNAC guys talked about in rebuilding America's defenses, in having a presence there. I feel like Iran is probably the most unstable bloc there, but they haven't been able to really propagate a reason for us to go in there with the American people. Again, Pakistan's being demonized at the moment. Most people in this country are still behind a war in Afghanistan and Iraq because they still think the boogeyman, Osama bin Laden, is out there. They just reiterated that by putting out an audio tape of him taking the Palestinian plight. So anybody who disagrees with Israeli force on the Gaza Strip is automatically, associated with the deepest, darkest villain there is out there. I don't see us leaving, Peter. I see us being there.
I think eventually I see us losing and leaving like Vietnam, but it took, it took a decade really after America realized it couldn't win before the Vietnam War was over, and an awful lot of people died, and even Americans died under Nixon, who had won on the campaign of ending the war. So we're used to presidents who campaign on ending a war, who make things worse. Yes, I fear it here. I don't, by the way, I'm not accusing Obama of being a cynic who is out to deceive the American people. I just see him as somebody hedged in by these forces who want that war. The underlying fact is that American oil companies have now invested a great deal in the oil and gas of Central Asia, and they need ways of getting it out. And they have one insecure pipeline going through Georgia, and we saw the trouble there last fall. Mm-hmm. And they would like very much to have a gas and an oil pipeline through Afghanistan. It's not going to happen by putting U.S. troops there, because that is just increasing the tension in the country. And the PNAC goal was has been bought by the U.S. Army. Their stated mission is full spectrum dominance in the world, mm-hmm. and part of that is this continuity of operations mission for the Army here is to have full spectrum dominance in the United States, because obviously if you want to dominate the world, you're going to have to dominate this country too. And these are still things that are not fully implemented, and what the people listening to this program have to do is to alert their friends and their neighbors that, the real role of the U.S. Army is to protect the American people. It is not to control the American people. That's a revolutionary change, and it should be challenged, and it should be stopped.
I absolutely agree with you there. My question is, do you think that conscription could actually happen under this administration? Tom Blankley, editor over at the Washington Times, has been parading around the media now for the last few years talking about conscription. I've got a clip of him on Pat Buchanan's MSNBC show where he's talking about it in the summer of 2007, saying, well, the time for that debate isn't now. It'll be under a new administration. Lo and behold, we get that new administration, and a week before they're inaugurated, the same guy, Blankley, puts out a book called American Grit, where, again, he's calling for conscription of 18 to 25-year-olds, 3 months in a boot camp, and 2 years mandatory service. And this is echoed by Obama's new chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel. He was just on C-SPAN over the summer talking about this same program. Is it going to happen? Is there a possibility of it happening here?
Well, again, I'm reluctant to predict, because the big block to it happening is that we will go back to the America of the 1960s, and you will have a new anti-war movement. Mm-hmm. And this was the big issue when America went into Iraq in 2003. And the generals were absolutely right. It should have been done with 500,000 troops. And Rumsfeld said that's ridiculous. We can use our new sophisticated weapons and win it quickly with only 120,000. And of course, he was wrong. But the reason that they didn't want to go to 500,000 troops is that they would have needed to have a draft for that. And that's why I'm not going to predict that we'll get a draft. We're going to get people who say, if you want to maintain all these missions, you're going to have a draft, and particularly because one thing that's certain is that Iraq has had very negative impact on recruitment for the Army, but the civilian people are very terrified of creating a situation where, once again, they are forcing young Americans to protect themselves by getting involved in an anti-war movement.
Peter, where can people get your information? I know you write for 911truth.org a lot, and you're on Blogger.
Yeah, I have my own website. Okay. I used to put things in it. Now it's mostly just connection to. I've written quite a lot of articles on the internet recently, and my own website is basically just a kind of a gateway to going into. It's hot linked to all these other articles. Be careful listening to this. It's simple, but it's important to get it right. www.peterdalescott.net. Or if you want, you could do .org, but do not do peterdalescott.com, because that's a hostile network. And so please remember, peterdalescott.net.
Basically just attackers trying to use your good name?
It's I don't quite know what it is. PeterDaleScott.com was opened up in Kenya by a company that's now in Belize. The only things it has on it that have anything to do with me are negative reviews of my books. So.
Yeah, how dare you try to expose light on the darkness over the past